There are people out there who don't want to hurt you. They just want to watch. And sometimes you won't even know they were there until it's too late. These are three true stories of ordinary people being watched without ever realizing it.
I'm not sure where to even start with this, but I promise you everything I'm about to say is real. My name's Evan. I live in upstate New York, and this happened to me last winter when I was staying at my grandparents' old house in Vermont. They passed away a few years back, and the property was handed down to my mom, but she never really wanted to deal with it. It's this little A-frame cabin on the edge of the woods, about 30 minutes outside Montpelier. Beautiful in the summer, but rough in the winter, snowed in constantly, sketchy reception, and no neighbors for miles. But I needed a place to crash for a couple weeks after a breakup, and my mom said I could use it if I didn't mind clearing the driveway myself. So I packed up my stuff and headed out there the first week of January. I figured the quiet would do me some good. No distractions. Just me, my laptop, and a few cords of firewood. The first few days were nice, peaceful, the kind of silence you don't get in the city. I'd sleep in, make coffee, read by the fire, and take walks through the woods when the snow wasn't too deep. At night, I'd light candles, throw on a podcast, and just exist. That house has this kind of heavy warmth to it, you know? The walls creak, the floors pop, but it's the kind of noise you get used to. Or at least, I thought I had. On the fifth night, I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner. It was close to 11 p.m. I remember the time because I had just checked the weather on my phone and was surprised I even had a signal. I was rinsing off a pan when I heard something. It was faint at first. Just this soft tapping sound, almost like fingernails on glass. I paused, thinking it was the ice cracking outside or snow falling from the roof, but it didn't stop. Tap, 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 coming from the living room. Specifically, from the big sliding glass doors that face the backwoods. I turned off the faucet and listened. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't random. It had a pattern to it. I walked slowly into the living room and just stood there. I couldn't see anything through the glass. It was pitch black outside and the interior lights just made it reflect like a mirror. I stared at my own reflection for a second. Then the sound stopped. I told myself it was probably a branch swaying in the wind or a chunk of snow melting and sliding down the roof. Something boring, something normal, but I grabbed the fireplace poker anyway and sat on the couch with it across my lap for the rest of the night. I didn't hear anything else. And eventually I fell asleep right there with the fire still going. The next morning, I checked the outside of the glass doors. No branches, no signs of animal tracks. But right there, about chest height on the glass, were 3 tiny smudges. Round, almost like fingerprints. But smaller. Way too small to be mine. I stared at them for a while, then wiped them off with my sleeve. I didn't want to think about it too much. 2 nights later, the tapping came back. Only this time, it wasn't just a few taps. It was longer, slower, like someone was dragging their fingernails lightly across the glass in circles. I was upstairs brushing my teeth when I heard it. The sound carried through the floorboards. My stomach dropped the second I recognized it. I turned off the bathroom light and crept to the top of the stairs. I couldn't see the doors from up there, but I could hear it clearly. Shh, 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 like someone idly drawing shapes with a fingertip on the glass. I didn't go downstairs. I just stood there frozen, holding my breath. The sound went on for maybe 20 more seconds, then stopped. Nothing. Dead silent. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed upstairs, lights off, just listening. At some point I convinced myself it was an animal or some trick of the wind. I had to, because the alternative meant someone was out there, watching the house, touching the glass. The next morning I went outside again. I looked for prints. anything, but the snow was undisturbed. Just smooth, powdery white, not a single mark. But the glass was clean too, no smudges, like whoever or whatever had been there knew I'd checked the last time. Or maybe they wiped them off themselves. I don't know. At this point, I was seriously debating heading home early, but I kept talking myself out of it. The roads weren't great, and I didn't want to look crazy calling my mom about phantom tapping. So I stayed. I started sleeping with a flashlight and my phone in bed next to me. I moved a chair in front of the sliding doors and closed the curtains at night. I tried to forget about it. But the worst night was the last one, the one that made me leave the cabin for good. It was a Friday. I spent most of the day trying to distract myself, reading, watching stuff on my laptop. At one point, I even convinced myself the tapping had all been in my head. Stress, isolation, cabin fever, whatever. I felt almost normal that night.
I made pasta, had a drink, watched a movie with the curtains drawn. Then, around midnight, I went to bed. I turned off the lights, crawled under the blankets, and laid there listening to the wind outside. Just when I was starting to drift off, I heard it again, but not the tapping. Footsteps on the roof. Slow, deliberate thuds, like someone walking in boots. I sat up instantly, pulse in my throat. The roof above the bedroom is steep and slippery, especially with the snow. No animal would move that slowly. And besides, I heard the creak of weight, like someone trying to stay balanced. Then it stopped. I reached for my flashlight, clicked it on. And right then, something scraped across the upstairs window. It was so quiet, I almost convinced myself it was my imagination. But I turned the light toward the window anyway, heart racing. That's when I saw it. Pressed against the glass were two small hands, palms flat, like someone crouching just out of view. The hands weren't wearing gloves. They were pale, thin, and they didn't move. I couldn't see the face, just the fingers. Spread out wide, tensed. I didn't scream. I don't know why. I just sat there frozen, staring at those hands. After what felt like a full minute, they pulled back slowly, not fast, not startled, almost calmly, like the person didn't care that I had seen them. I heard a soft thump on the roof again, then nothing. The rest of the night was silent, but I didn't sleep. I sat with my back against the wall, flashlight gripped tight, waiting for morning. At sunrise, I packed everything and left. I didn't shower, didn't even change clothes. I just got in my car and drove. By the time I reached the main road, I realized I had left the firewood door open, and I didn't care. I told my mom what happened a few days later. She didn't believe me exactly, but agreed the house probably needed new locks. A few weeks after that, a neighbor, someone from 2 roads over, called her to say they'd seen someone walking along the tree line near the property. Small, wearing white. But when they got closer, whoever it was just turned and walked straight into the woods. No shoes, no footprints were ever found. I haven't been back to the cabin since, but every now and then I dream about those hands, about the way they pressed against the glass, not to scare me, but like they were checking if it would open. As terrifying as that was, this next one might be even worse, because sometimes the thing watching you doesn't knock. It just waits until you fall asleep. My name's Lacey, and this happened 2 years ago when I was 22. At the time, I had just moved into my first apartment alone. It was in this small town just outside Spokane, Washington. The place was nothing fancy, a converted garage technically. 1 bedroom, tiny kitchen, and a single window in the main living space. But it was cheap, private, and after a rough breakup, I wanted my own space. I was working part-time at a local bookstore, mostly evenings. So I usually got home around 9:30 or 10. The neighborhood was quiet, a lot of older residents and retired couples. Definitely not the kind of place where you expect anything dangerous. And for the first few months, everything was normal. I'd get home, throw something in the microwave, and watch Netflix until I fell asleep. I had a little futon set up across from the TV, and that window I mentioned, it faced the street. There was a street lamp just outside, so the apartment never got fully dark. At the time, I actually liked that. It made me feel less alone, but now that window haunts me. The first time I noticed anything strange, it was barely even a thing. I had just turned off the TV for the night, probably close to midnight. I was walking around, tidying up before bed, when I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. Just a flicker. I turned toward the window, but all I saw were shadows. I figured it was a neighbor walking by. Nothing weird, but it stuck with me. The way it moved, fast but hesitant. You know that feeling when you almost catch someone looking at you? Like your instincts fire before your brain can explain why? That's what it felt like. Still, I brushed it off, but over the next week or so, it started happening more, always when I was unwinding for the night. The blinds on that window were those cheap plastic vertical ones, and they never fully closed. I remember thinking, I should really replace these, but I kept forgetting. Then one night, I got home a little earlier, maybe 8:45. I was walking up to my door, phone in one hand, drink in the other. And as I got close, I saw it. A footprint, right in front of the window. It had rained earlier that day, so the ground was still damp, and there was a very clear, very fresh boot print in the mud. I looked around. Nothing. No one. But my skin went cold. It was just one print. Not a path, like someone had stood there for a long time and then walked backward. I went inside and locked the door, double-checked every window. That night, I dragged my dresser in front of the window just in case. I barely slept. The next day at work, I told my coworker Sam about it. He offered to come by and help me install a camera or even swap the blinds. I laughed it off, told him I was probably just being paranoid, but deep down, I didn't feel like I was. The next few nights were quiet. Until that Saturday, I got home around 9, ate dinner, watched some dumb horror movie. I think it was The Descent, which I'd seen before. I was halfway through it when my phone buzzed. A weather alert, storm warning, high winds expected overnight. Sure enough, by midnight, the wind was howling. I decided to go to bed early. I turned off the lights, brushed my teeth, and crawled into bed. But I couldn't sleep. The wind kept rattling the window, and I kept imagining that boot print outside. Somewhere around 1:15, I gave up, got up, walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water. That's when I saw it. The blinds were swaying, just slightly, not from the wind, from the inside. I froze. The window was closed, locked, but one of the slats, near the bottom, was bent, like it had been pulled. I didn't move. Then, just beyond that slat, I saw an eye. I'm not exaggerating, an actual eye, inches from the glass. Staring in, I dropped the glass. It shattered, water everywhere. I backed up so fast I hit the kitchen counter, but when I looked again, the eye was gone. I rushed to the door and locked the deadbolt, even though it was already locked. Then I grabbed my phone and called 911. They got there in under 10 minutes. I was still crouched in the hallway when they arrived. 2 officers walked the property. One of them found fresh prints, again, just one set. This time there were 3, all right in front of the window, deep impressions in the mud like someone had been standing perfectly still for a long time. The officer asked me if I knew anyone who might be stalking me. I said no, told him about the eye, the blinds, the feeling I'd had for weeks. He didn't say much, just told me to stay somewhere else for a few nights. So I did. I stayed with Sam for the weekend, and I'll be honest, part of me felt embarrassed, like maybe I had imagined it.
The police hadn't found anyone, just footprints. Maybe I was overreacting, but then Sam said something I'll never forget. We were sitting on his couch, eating pizza, and he looked over and said, "Lacey, you ever wonder why there were only footprints in front of the window? Like, if someone walked up, wouldn't there be more leaving?" That hit me, because he was right. Every time it was just the prints standing there, never walking away. I went back to the apartment that Monday afternoon. I had taken the day off work. I planned to clean up, maybe start looking for a new place. When I got inside, the first thing I noticed was the smell, like sweat, and something stale, sour. I thought maybe something had gone bad in the fridge, but when I checked, everything was fine. I opened the closet near the front door and immediately gagged. It was worse in there. My skin started crawling. I pulled the chain light inside the closet and saw something that made my stomach drop. The air vent at the base of the closet wall was unscrewed, barely, but enough to notice. The screws were loose and angled like they'd been turned by hand. I dropped to my knees, heart pounding, and looked closer. There were scratches around the metal frame and a small, smudged handprint. I ran out of the apartment and didn't go back. Sam came with me later that night to grab my essentials. He stayed by the door while I packed, watching every corner like we were being hunted. I moved out by the end of the week. Police followed up, but they didn't find anything. No fingerprints, no suspects. Nothing. I still think about that closet sometimes. About how long those screws had been loose. About how close someone had been. And worst of all, how many nights they might have been there, watching me from inside the wall.
You'd think being alone in the woods would be peaceful, until you realize you were never actually alone to begin with. This next story takes that fear to a whole new level.
I used to do delivery work a couple years ago. Nothing special, just food delivery through one of those apps. I lived in northern Indiana, close to South Bend, and I'd usually drive late at night since that's when the payouts were better. Most nights were pretty uneventful, just a lot of driving around half-empty neighborhoods and waiting in parking lots. Sometimes you'd meet weird customers, but it was all minor stuff. I liked the quiet, I liked the routine, but there's one night that still sits in the back of my mind like something I almost imagined. Like it wasn't fully real. Even though I know it was early February. I remember that because it had snowed really hard a few days earlier, and a lot of the side streets still hadn't been cleared properly. I was working the night shift, probably started around 6 and figured I'd go until midnight if the tips were decent. Around 10:45, I got a ping from a customer with a weird username, just a string of letters and numbers. No profile picture. That wasn't uncommon though. People make burner accounts all the time for stuff like this. The order was for a single iced coffee and a muffin from a 24-hour diner a few miles away. Kind of a weird order that late, but whatever. I accepted it. When I arrived at the diner, it was totally empty. Just one old guy behind the counter who barely looked at me. I picked up the order and double-checked the address. It was about 20 minutes away, way out past the main roads, closer to the edge of a nature preserve. That wasn't ideal, especially with the snow, but the tip was solid, so I headed out. I remember thinking how dark it was out there. No streetlights, barely any houses, just long, quiet roads with open fields and the occasional cluster of trees. My headlights felt like the only thing holding back total blackness. The GPS finally led me to this narrow one-lane gravel road, the kind that doesn't look like it goes anywhere, just a tunnel of branches and snowbanks. I hesitated for a second but kept going. The pin was only half a mile up. As I drove, I noticed something strange. There were no tire tracks, just untouched snow and gravel. It didn't look like anyone had been down this road in days. Eventually, I came to a clearing with a single house sitting in the middle of it. 2 stories, all dark, no porch light, no lights inside. Just this cold, silent house in the middle of nowhere. I pulled up and turned off the engine. Immediately, it felt wrong, like I shouldn't be there. The kind of gut instinct that you don't really understand, but you trust anyway. I checked the app. No special delivery instructions, no leave at door or anything. I got out of the car, order in hand, and walked to the porch. The wood creaked under my boots, loud in the silence. I knocked once, nothing, knocked again. Still nothing. I was about to just leave the food on the step and bounce when I heard something upstairs, a faint shuffle, then the sound of a door creaking open. I froze. After a second, a light flicked on in one of the upper windows. Just barely, like a lamp turning on in a distant room. I waited, expecting someone to come down. No one did. Instead, I got a message through the app. No name, just a chat bubble. Can you bring it upstairs? I just stared at the screen. The message didn't make sense. The app doesn't allow customers to chat with drivers unless a driver messages first, and I hadn't. Then a second message popped up. Come around the side. Stairs are in back. My hands went cold. I looked up at the house. The light upstairs was still on, no movement, no sounds. I didn't reply. I just backed off the porch and got in my car. I sat there for a second thinking maybe this was some kind of prank or setup, but as I put the car in reverse, my headlights hit something in the trees. A person, standing behind the house, barely visible between the branches, not moving, just watching. I couldn't make out a face, just a tall figure in dark clothes, completely still, like they'd been standing there the whole time, waiting. I didn't wait to see what they'd do. I hit the gas and backed down that gravel road so fast I almost skidded into a ditch. I didn't stop until I hit the main road again, heart pounding, mouth dry. When I finally pulled into a gas station, I checked the app. The order was canceled. No record of it, no username, no chat history, like it had never existed. I reported it to the app support line. They said no such order had ever gone through under my account. No timestamp. Nothing. I checked my delivery history. It jumped from 10:30 to 11:15 with no orders in between. I even went back to the diner a few days later and asked the guy behind the counter if he remembered me picking up that iced coffee. He looked confused and said they hadn't had any delivery orders that night after 9. I still don't know what the hell happened. I know where I went. I remember every second of that drive. I remember the way the air felt when I stepped onto that porch, the crunch of snow, the glow of that upstairs light. But the app says it never happened. And I don't deliver at night anymore because I can't stop thinking about that person in the trees, just watching, waiting, like they had expected me to come inside, like they were disappointed I didn't. 3 people were told the same thing. Don't go in that room. But curiosity, it's louder than fear. What they found behind those doors wasn't just disturbing. It changed them. These aren't ghost stories. These are true stories. And they all started the same way. Don't go in that room. I was crashing at my friend's new place because my apartment had a busted pipe and the whole floor was torn up. Temporary situation, just a few days. His name's Marcus. We've known each other since community college. Real chill guy. He had just bought this weird little fixer upper house out in the woods outside Asheville. The kind of place with more trees than cell towers and 0 streetlights. I remember joking with him that it looked like the kind of place where the horror movie starts. He laughed at that. The first couple of nights were fine. A little too quiet, maybe. You could hear every creak in the floorboards and the pipes groaned like they were alive. But whatever, it's an old house. The only weird thing was the hallway. Long and narrow, it stretched from the living room past the kitchen and ended in this ugly old door that didn't match the rest of the house. Greenish paint peeling off it, and the knob looked like it belonged in a jail cell. First time I noticed it, I pointed and said, "What's in there?" Marcus glanced up from his beer and his face got tight for just a second. Then he smiled. "That's the basement," he said. "Well, technically, but I keep it locked. The floorboards down there are rotted and dangerous. I don't even go in there." "Fair enough." He said he'd just throw some storage boxes in there once it got renovated. The way he said it felt weird, though, like he rehearsed it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not unusual. I've always been a light sleeper, but I kept hearing this low, rhythmic, thumping sound. It was faint, like it was coming from beneath the floor, almost like a slow heartbeat. I told myself it was the old plumbing or the wind or whatever, but once I noticed it, I couldn't unhear it. At breakfast, I asked Marcus if the basement had a sump pump or something mechanical that could be running. He paused with his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. "Nah," he said finally. "There's no electricity hooked up down there." Then he gave me this look, one of those drop-it kind of looks, and I did, mostly. But later that day, I was alone in the house. Marcus had gone to the hardware store, and I figured I'd do some cleaning to pay back the hospitality. When I vacuumed the hallway rug, I found something wedged underneath the floor trim near that weird old basement door. It was a little button, like from a shirt, brown, kinda shiny, looked old. I picked it up without thinking, and the moment I touched it, I swear I heard something. Not out loud. More like in my body, like an echo under my skin, just this low vibration for a split second. I dropped the button. That night, Marcus made us some burgers, and we were watching old episodes of It's Always Sunny. I brought up the button. He didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. "Look, I didn't want to say anything," he said quietly. "But please don't mess with that room. I know how that sounds, but it's not just unsafe. Something's off down there." I kind of chuckled, thinking he was joking, but his expression never changed. Then he said the words I'll never forget. "Don't go in that room. Seriously." I nodded, said okay, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was like telling someone not to look behind them when they're walking alone in the dark. You're going to look. I stayed up late again, this time half from curiosity, half from nerves. Around 2 a.m., I passed by the hallway to get water, and the basement door was open. Just a crack, but open. I stopped cold. The house was completely still, no breeze, no windows open. That door had been closed and locked. I'd seen the padlock on it earlier that day. I leaned forward, no sound, no light, just pure, pitch-black darkness beyond the door frame. I told myself it must have come loose. Old house, bad wood, whatever. But I also noticed the rug in front of the door had been shifted, like someone had dragged something heavy across it. Against every instinct in my body, I stepped toward the door. "Just peek," I said out loud like an idiot. "Just a quick peek." I grabbed my phone, flicked on the flashlight, and pushed the door open slowly. It gave this horrible low creak like it hadn't moved in years. The stairs were steep and narrow, coated in dust. I could see the floor below, uneven concrete, cracks spiderwebbing across it. There was this faint, earthy smell, but something else too, like rust and something sour. I stepped down one stair, then another. Each one groaned beneath me. The flashlight cut through the dark, but barely lit anything more than 10 feet ahead. The room at the bottom was big, unfinished. There were old shelves, a stack of newspapers, and a chair. Right in the middle of the room, wooden, facing the far wall. On that wall was something drawn in black marker, thick circles, overlapping lines, and something that looked like a face. I stepped off the last stair, my heart pounding. I know this sounds cliché, but I felt like I wasn't alone. Like there was something just out of view, like the air itself was pressing against my skin. Then my phone buzzed. I nearly jumped out of my body. It was a text from Marcus. "Did you open the basement door?" I froze. How did he know? Before I could respond, I heard something upstairs, a slow creaking sound. Footsteps, heavy ones. Not Marcus. He wasn't due back for another hour. I killed my flashlight, pitch black, my ears strained. The footsteps got closer to the stairs, then stopped. And then I heard the door. Click. It shut. I was in total darkness now, and I heard it. Breathing, not from above, from behind me. It was ragged, slow, like someone half asleep. I turned, barely breathing, and flicked the flashlight on for just a second. Nothing. But the chair. It was empty when I walked down. I was sure of it. Now there was someone sitting in it. I couldn't make out a face, just a shape, but I could hear it. Breathing, rocking slowly back and forth. I bolted. I slammed into the stairs, half climbing, half falling up. The door was locked. I banged on it, shouting Marcus's name even though I knew he wasn't home. Then I heard the sound behind me, the creak of the chair. It had stopped, and something was moving toward me, fast. The door burst open. Marcus stood there, panting, holding a crowbar. He yanked me out, slammed the door, and reattached the lock in seconds. We didn't speak for a long time. Eventually, he told me everything. The previous owner had been some recluse. Lived alone, barely came into town. When he died, the place was untouched for months until Marcus bought it cheap. The agent told him there was minor basement damage. No one mentioned the chair, or the symbols, or the fact that the door won't stay locked. "It's like the house wants people to go down there," Marcus said. "Wants someone to see." I left that morning. I didn't ask for the rest. I didn't want to know. But sometimes, late at night, I still think about the breathing, the way it sounded just like mine, like it matched me. And the worst part? A week after I left, Marcus texted me again. "I found your phone in the basement. Thought you had it with you." That doesn't make sense. I'm holding it right now. That first story still gives me chills, but it's not the only time someone was warned and ignored it. Our next story takes place in a completely different setting, but the outcome is just as unsettling. This happened when I was 21. I was in between leases trying to save some money after dropping out of college. My cousin Devin had just moved into this 2-story rental on the edge of Raleigh. Quiet neighborhood, tons of trees, kind of isolated. He offered me his guest room for a few weeks while I figured things out. I took him up on it without thinking twice. Devin and I weren't super close, but we got along fine. He worked night shifts as a security guard, so I'd have the house to myself most nights. I didn't mind. I was grateful just to have a bed and a roof. The house itself wasn't weird or creepy, at least not right away. It was built in the early 2000s. Beige siding, detached garage, big backyard, totally normal suburban home. Except for the door at the end of the hallway upstairs. It looked like it was supposed to be a closet. Same white paint as the others, same brass knob. But Devin had taped over it with a strip of duct tape, and there was a little piece of notebook paper stuck to the center with red ink that said, "Do not open." The first night I saw it, I asked him what the deal was. He didn't laugh. He didn't joke. He just looked at me and said, "Don't go in that room." He said it slow, like he meant it. I asked if it was broken or dangerous or whatever, and he just shook his head and said, "I don't use it. I don't open it. Don't mess with it." I said, "Okay." I thought maybe there was a mold problem in there or something, but that was the first moment I got the sense something was off about the house. That night I was in bed scrolling on my phone. The house was dead quiet, except for the occasional pop of the central air. I remember glancing down the hallway, toward that door, and feeling this tightness in my chest I couldn't explain. It was completely closed, lights off, but it almost felt like someone was standing on the other side of it. I brushed it off. Just nerves, new place, unfamiliar sounds. The next day, I did some freelance work on my laptop, made myself some food, and kinda lazed around. That door kept drawing my attention, though. I even stood in front of it once, just staring. The tape on it was peeling a little on one side. I wanted to ask Devin again what was inside, but I didn't. He didn't seem like he wanted to talk about it. That night, something woke me up around 3 a.m. I wasn't dreaming, and I wasn't thirsty. I just woke up like I had been yanked out of sleep. The house was silent, and then I heard it. Knocking. 3 slow knocks. I sat straight up in bed, heart immediately racing. At first I thought it was the front door, but then I realized it was coming from upstairs, from the hallway, from that door. I didn't move, I didn't breathe. I just stared at the bedroom door, trying to convince myself I imagined it. Then again, knock, 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 deliberate, slow. I got up and opened my bedroom door just a crack. The hallway was pitch black, except for the faint light from the kitchen nightlight bleeding in from downstairs. I could barely make out the outline of the closed door at the end of the hall, but something was different. The tape was gone. Just gone, like it had never been there. I shut my door, locked it, and waited the rest of the night without sleeping. The next morning, Devin got home around 8. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, eyes bloodshot, jittery. I told him what I heard. He didn't say, "You're imagining things." He didn't say, "It's just the house settling." He just asked one question. "You didn't open it, right?" I told him no. He stared at me for a long time, then nodded and went to bed. No explanation, no follow-up. That whole day, I couldn't stop thinking about the door. I even Googled the address, checked news archives, read it, everything. Nothing came up, just property listings and Zillow stuff. That night, Devin left for work again around 10. I was sitting on the couch watching TV with the hallway light on behind me. At one point, I got up to grab a soda from the fridge. As I passed the hallway, I froze. The door was open. Just a few inches, barely cracked. I stood there, staring. I hadn't heard it open. I'd been just a room away. I stepped closer. I know how stupid this sounds. I knew I shouldn't, but I told myself I'd just peek. I didn't believe in ghosts or anything, so I figured there was probably some logical explanation. Some bad insulation, maybe warped hinges. Something. I pushed the door open. The room was small, empty, no windows, just gray walls, hardwood floor, and this weird square patch in the middle where the floor was darker, like something heavy used to sit there. There was this smell, not rot, not sewage. It smelled like wet metal, old pennies and something mildewy. I stepped inside and the light bulb flickered once, then died. Total darkness. I turned on my phone flashlight, and that's when I saw it. In the corner of the room, scratched into the drywall, were words. Dozens of them, overlapping each other in shaky, frantic handwriting. "Don't look at him. He stays still if you're watching. He comes closer when you blink." And then lower down, almost at floor level, scrawled over and over and over, "Why did you open the door?" I backed out slowly, heart hammering, slammed the door, and retaped it with packing tape I found in Devin's kitchen drawer. I didn't sleep that night either. The next morning I confronted Devin. I told him everything. The scratching on the walls, the knocking, the open door. He just stared at me. Then he said something that still messes with me. "I used to live in that room." He said it real quiet, like it hurt to say. Apparently, when he first moved in, that was his bedroom, until the dreams started. Dreams about something watching him from the corner. He'd wake up facing the wall, too scared to turn around. He thought it was sleep paralysis. Until one night, he did turn around, and something was standing in the middle of the room. Tall, too tall, no face, just a dark outline with a head that almost touched the ceiling. It didn't move, it didn't speak, until he blinked. Then it was closer. He moved out of that room the next day, He tried to sage it, bless it, seal it. Nothing worked. So he just locked it up and stopped talking about it. The landlord doesn't know. No one knows. That was the last night I stayed there. I booked a motel the next morning and got the hell out. But here's the part that still keeps me up. About 2 weeks after I left, Devin called me. He sounded out of breath, panicked. He said, "Hey, do you remember when you said you taped the door shut?" I said, "Yeah." He was silent for a long time. Then he whispered, "There's no tape on it now. And I heard knocking last night from the inside." We haven't spoken since. And I never learned what was in that room before Devin moved in. All I know is I should have listened. You'd think after hearing something like that, no one else would take a risk like that again. But you'd be wrong. In this next story, another locked door, another ignored warning, and a discovery that should have stayed buried.
This happened when I was 24. I was working as a property manager for a small housing company in northern Michigan. Most of our units were older homes, mid-century, a little beat up, but cheap enough for students and working-class folks. My job was mostly scheduling repairs, giving tours, and sometimes prepping houses before a new tenant moved in. That's how I ended up at Unit 106. It was a 2-bedroom ranch-style house, tucked behind some overgrown hedges on a dead-end street just outside Marquette. Nothing fancy. Beige siding, cracked driveway, 1-car garage. I was there to do a walkthrough and take photos for the listing. The last tenant had been evicted for unpaid rent and left in a hurry, so I was expecting a mess. What I wasn't expecting was the note taped to the inside of the front door. It was a ripped envelope, scribbled on in black marker. 4 words: "Do not open back room." I remember reading it and just kind of laughing to myself. Like, okay, sure, probably mold or raccoons or something, but I wasn't exactly in a position to ignore parts of the house. I had a checklist to complete. The place was mostly empty. A few broken chairs, peeling wallpaper, that weird silence old houses have when the heat isn't running. Every floorboard creaked. There was dust in the corners of every room, but nothing alarming. Until I got to the hallway, there were 3 doors. 2 normal bedrooms and then one at the very end, painted over completely. No handle, no label. It didn't even look like a real door, more like a sealed panel. I remembered the note immediately. Back room. I didn't plan on opening it, I really didn't, but I wanted to take pictures of the hallway, and that meant facing the door head on. As I raised my phone, I noticed something odd. The bottom corner of the door had scratch marks, deep ones, not cat scratches, more like gouges, like someone tried to dig out from the inside. I crouched down to look closer, and I swear to God, there was something scrawled into the wood just above the floor. "It's still in here." That's when I stood up and walked out. I finished my checklist, skipped that door, and locked the place up. Later that day, I asked my boss if there were any maintenance requests or safety reports for 106. She looked confused and said no, just a standard eviction. I brought up the weird sealed door, and she just said, "Yeah, some of the old places have makeshift closets or blocked off utility panels. Don't mess with it unless there's an issue." So that was that. But the next morning, I got a call from a plumber we sometimes worked with. He was at 106 to shut off the outside water valve, and he sounded weird, kind of breathless. He said, "Hey, is anyone staying at this property right now?" I told him no. He paused and said, "I just heard someone knock on the wall while I was under the crawl space, like right above me." I laughed at first, told him the house was empty, but then I remembered the door, and I didn't laugh anymore. Later that week, I had to go back to 106. Someone from the city needed to do an inspection on the furnace, and I had to let him in. I dreaded it, but I told myself I'd stay near the front, let the inspector do his thing, and leave.
That didn't happen. The guy, he was older, real gruff, walked through the house for maybe 5 minutes before I heard him call out, "Hey, what's with this back door? You got a key?" I walked down the hall and found him standing in front of that door. He was knocking on it with his flashlight. I told him I didn't know, that it was sealed shut. He raised an eyebrow and said, "No, it's not. It's just stuck." And before I could stop him, he shoulder-checked it once, twice. The third time it burst open with a crack. The smell hit me first. Wet wood, mildew, and something sharp, like copper. The room was completely dark. I turned on my phone flashlight and stepped inside before I could think twice. The walls were covered in newspaper clippings, dozens of them, taped and stapled from floor to ceiling. Every single one was about missing people. Local cases, national ones, some decades old. One stood out immediately. It was folded and pinned right at eye level, circled in red ink. A headline from 1989. Teen vanishes after going into vacant house. Police still searching. The photo showed a girl, maybe 16, smiling. The address under the photo, 106 Maple Street. The same house. I remember turning to the inspector, about to ask him something, but he was gone. No footsteps, no door creak, just gone. I ran back out into the hallway, no one there. The front door was still shut. I walked through every room calling his name, panicking more with each second. I even went outside. No car in the driveway, no truck. It was like he'd never been there. I called my boss and told her everything. I must have sounded insane, rambling about clippings and disappearances and the sealed door. But all she said was, "Did you open that room?" I didn't know what to say. She sighed and muttered, "We've had trouble renting that house for years." I should have pulled the listing. I asked her what she meant. She just said, "If you go back, don't go in that room again." That was the last time I entered 106. The property stayed vacant for months. Eventually, they gutted the place. Tore out the drywall, removed the weird door completely. But here's the part that still gets me. One of the contractors who helped with the renovation called us a few weeks after the job was done. He sounded shaken. He said while he was stripping out the walls, he found something in the back room, a crawl space hatch under the floorboards. It led to a hollow area under the room, a few feet deep, not quite a basement, not quite a crawl space. And inside, they found a sleeping bag, empty food cans, old Polaroids, and a pair of eyeglasses. The contractor didn't touch anything, just reported it to the city. They never followed up. No news article, no police statement, just silence. I don't know who lived in that space. I don't know who scratched the message into the door, but I'll never forget what it said. It's still in here. And maybe it still is. They thought they were home alone. Doors locked, lights off, and nothing to fear. But something else was there too. These are 3 terrifying true stories of people who weren't as alone as they thought. And by the time they realized it, it was already too late. I had just moved into my first house. Nothing crazy, just a small 2-bedroom starter home about 30 minutes outside of town. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of place where people wave at each other without actually knowing names. I liked that. I wanted to be left alone. The house was older, built sometime in the 70s with a creaky wooden frame and these weird little drafty spots by every window. But I liked it. I told myself the creaks and groans were just part of the charm. The first few nights were uneventful. I'd unpack a few boxes, make some cheap dinner, scroll TikTok until I passed out. Normal stuff, but then came Friday. It started the same as always. I got home around 6, microwaved some leftover pasta, and settled in to binge a couple episodes of some show I was only half invested in. Around 10 p.m., I decided to call it. I turned off the lights, locked the doors, front and back, double-checked the windows like always, and crawled into bed. That night, I couldn't sleep. It wasn't like I was anxious or anything. I just couldn't relax. I tossed, turned, fluffed my pillow, even got back up to drink some water. That's when I noticed it. My back door was unlocked. Now look, I know I locked it. I do it every night. I even did my usual routine, pulling on the handle twice to make sure it was shut tight. But when I walked into the kitchen, the door was slightly open. Not a lot, just a crack, like someone had opened it and didn't close it all the way. I just stood there. My heart started thumping loud in my chest. I slowly reached out and closed it, then locked it. Again. This time I yanked on the handle hard, even though I knew no one was outside. That's what I told myself anyway. The next morning I chalked it up to memory. Maybe I just thought I locked it. I was tired, distracted, whatever, but that night something else happened. It was around 2:45 a.m. I woke up to this faint, rhythmic sound, a dull thud-thud from somewhere inside the house. Not loud, but steady. I sat up in bed, heart already racing. I listened for a minute, then climbed out of bed. The hallway was dark. I didn't turn on any lights. I didn't want to make it obvious that I was moving around. The sound was coming from the living room, that much I could tell. Thud, thud, like something was bumping against the floor. I crept down the hallway, and as I got closer, I realized it was coming from the front door, like someone was pressing their palm against it over and over. I stopped at the corner of the hallway, hidden by the wall. I couldn't see the door, but I could feel it. Someone was on the other side. Then, silence. No more bumping, just a long, heavy stillness. Then came the whisper, just outside the door. "I see you." I swear to God, I stopped breathing. I backed away, slow and silent, then ran back to my room and locked the door. I sat in the corner, gripping my phone, debating whether to call the police. But what would I say? That someone whispered outside my door? Eventually, I must have dozed off in the corner. When I woke up, it was daylight. I checked the front porch. No one, no footprints, no signs of anyone even being there. Maybe I dreamed it. Or maybe I wanted to believe I did. I spent the rest of the weekend paranoid. I installed a cheap security cam above my front door, downloaded the app, set up alerts. That following Tuesday, something new happened. I got home from work, tossed my bag on the couch, and was about to start making dinner when I noticed something was off. I couldn't place it at first, but something just didn't feel right. That's when I looked at the hallway. The attic door was cracked open. Now this made no sense. The attic door is one of those old-school square panels that you pull down with a string, and I hadn't touched it since moving in. But the string was dangling now, and the panel was lowered halfway, like someone had opened it from the inside. I stared at it for a solid minute. Didn't move, didn't blink. Then I grabbed a broom and slowly pushed the panel back up until it clicked shut. I didn't dare pull it all the way down. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I kept the lights on in my bedroom, slept with a kitchen knife beside me. Every sound the house made had me on edge. Around 3:30 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected, front door camera. I sat straight up and opened the app. There was someone standing at my door. They weren't knocking. They weren't ringing the bell. Just standing there, head tilted to the side, staring directly at the camera. No mask. Just a man, mid-40s maybe, scruffy beard, hoodie pulled up. The image was grainy, but his eyes were unmistakable. He was smiling. Then he stepped out of view. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. Nothing. I watched the app until the sun came up. Next day I went to the police. They sent someone out to look around, took my statement, asked if anything had been stolen. No, I said, just weird things. They didn't seem concerned. That night I had a friend stay over, Josh, an old coworker. I didn't want to be alone. We drank, played video games, tried to shake the weirdness. It worked, for a while. Then, around midnight, the power went out. No storm, no wind, just click, everything went black. Josh and I looked at each other. Then, in the silence, we heard something above us, in the attic. A dragging sound, like something or someone was crawling. We stared at the ceiling, too afraid to move. Then, a thump, directly above us. Josh whispered, "Did you hear that?" I nodded. Another thump, closer to the attic stairs. We both ran out of the house. Josh called the cops. They showed up maybe 15 minutes later. 2 squad cars. They went inside, checked the attic. It was empty. No signs of forced entry. Nothing missing, nothing broken. They told me it was probably an animal, maybe a raccoon, but I know what I heard. That wasn't a raccoon. Josh never came back after that night. I started sleeping with the lights on again, knife under the pillow. I even moved a chair in front of my bedroom door. A few nights later, I got another motion alert, front door camera. I opened the app. There was no one there. But the door was open. I know I locked it. I grabbed the knife, crept out of the bedroom, and made my way to the front of the house. My hands were shaking. The air felt wrong, heavy, like something was in the house already. I checked the door. It was wide open. Nothing outside, no one on the street. But when I turned around to go back inside, I noticed it. Footprints, muddy prints on the wood floor, leading from the front door into the hallway and toward the attic stairs. They stopped right beneath the attic door. That's when I knew I wasn't living alone. There had been someone in my house. Maybe there still was. I moved out that weekend, packed everything I could fit into my car, and crashed on a friend's couch. I didn't even go back for the rest. 2 weeks later, I checked the security cam one last time. There was a single clip from the night I left, a man walking down the hallway, from the attic, straight into the kitchen. He turned, looked directly at the camera, and smiled, like he knew I was watching. The house is still listed. No one's bought it, and the last few reviews on the listing all say the same thing. Great neighborhood, but we kept hearing footsteps in the attic.
Some intruders come and go, others never left in the first place. But sometimes it's not your home they're in. It's someone else's. And you just happen to be the one house sitting. This next story will change how you feel about sleeping in someone else's home. This happened to me back in 2017, and even now, I can't walk through my own house at night without checking every corner. It was the first time I'd ever lived alone. I'd just turned 25, landed a decent job doing IT for a logistics company, and finally moved out of my parents' place. My apartment wasn't fancy. It was a bottom-floor unit in a fourplex just outside the city, but it was mine. My own little quiet space. And for the first few months, it was great. I loved the freedom. No roommates, no noise, just me and whatever I wanted to do. But that silence. It eventually started feeling different. It started on a Thursday night. I remember because I was working late, had my laptop set up on the kitchen counter, trying to catch up on a server ticket backlog. It was probably around 11 p.m. when I heard the first sound. It came from the laundry closet. A soft click, like something settling behind the door. It wasn't loud, not even strange, really. These apartments were older, and the water heater was tucked into the same closet. But then it happened again. Click, and this time it was followed by a soft, low scratch, like a fingertip dragging against the inside of the door. I froze. The scratching stopped almost instantly. I waited. Nothing. I walked over, slowly, pulled the door open. Empty. Washer, dryer, a few hanging jackets. No one there. I told myself it was just the water heater shifting. Maybe the pipes expanding or something. Still, I left the door open after that. The next night was quiet. Nothing out of the ordinary. But Saturday
Saturday is when everything shifted. I'd gone out to grab groceries. Nothing unusual, just a quick run to stock up for the week. I was gone maybe 40 minutes. When I got home, I opened the door and immediately felt it. The air inside my apartment was colder than outside. Not just chilly, unnaturally cold, like a fridge had been left open. I figured maybe I'd left the AC running, but the unit was off. Still, I brushed it off. Maybe some kind of airflow from the vent system. I unloaded the groceries, put everything away, and didn't think much of it until I went to grab a fork from the drawer. The silverware drawer was already open. And the weirdest part? The knife I usually kept at the back of the tray, the one I used the least, was gone. I stood there staring for way too long, trying to remember if I'd used it. But I hadn't even cooked anything that day. It was just missing. That night, I locked every window, double-checked every door. I even put a chair under the handle of the sliding glass door, just in case. Still, I barely slept. I kept thinking about that drawer, that one knife. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Sunday morning, I woke up early, made coffee, sat down to scroll through my phone like I always do, and then I saw it. My bedroom door was closed. I never shut it. Not unless I'm changing, but now it was shut, and I'd slept with it open. I stood there for a long time just staring at it, then slowly reached for the handle and pushed it open. Empty, no one inside. But the air, it had that same coldness, like something had just been there. I called maintenance, asked if anyone had entered my apartment. They said no. I asked if anyone had a key or was doing inspections. Again, no. That night, I left the hallway light on. And that was the night I saw it. It was sometime past 2 a.m. I was lying in bed, trying to ignore the fact that I felt like I was being watched. The hallway light filtered softly through the crack in my door. Then, creak, a single floorboard, from the kitchen. I sat up, didn't move, just listened. Then again, creak, closer this time, just outside my bedroom door. I reached down, grabbed the aluminum flashlight I kept beside my bed. It was heavy, like a small baton. My fingers wrapped tight around it, then came a whisper, just barely audible. He's awake. I leapt out of bed and flung the door open. No one. I checked the kitchen, the bathroom, the coat closet, nothing. But one thing was off. The hallway light. The one I had left on? It was off now. I hadn't touched it. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called my friend Dan and asked if he could come over and stay the night. I didn't care how it sounded. I needed someone else in that space. Just for a night. He came over after work, brought a few beers, and we ended up playing video games until around midnight. I hadn't told him everything yet, just said the place was giving me weird vibes. At some point, Dan went to use the bathroom. When he came back out, he looked pale. "What?" I asked. He pointed toward the kitchen. "You left someone else in here?" I just stared at him. "What are you talking about?" "I saw someone, just now, in the kitchen. They ducked behind the counter. We both ran in there, looked everywhere, nothing." Dan thought maybe it was his reflection, that his eyes were playing tricks on him, but then we heard the thud. From the laundry closet, that same thud I'd heard that first night. We both turned. The closet door was slightly open. Dan walked over slowly and yanked the door open in one motion. Empty. But right there, wedged behind the washer, was the missing knife. We called the cops. This time, I didn't care how it sounded. They came, swept the apartment, didn't find anything. Said it might have been an attempted break-in and that maybe I scared the guy off. They took the knife for prints, but nothing came back. Dan stayed the night. Slept on the couch. I didn't sleep at all. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. Until Wednesday.
That morning, I walked into the kitchen and noticed something strange. There were crumbs on the counter, not just a few, a line of them, like someone had made a sandwich in the middle of the night. And the bread bag? It was open. I live alone. I called Dan again. This time, I didn't ask. I begged him to help me check the attic. Now, this attic wasn't accessible from a proper staircase. It had one of those pull-down ladder things in the hallway. I'd never been up there. We climbed up together, flashlights in hand, and right there, tucked in the far corner of the crawl space, was a blanket, a backpack, and a half-eaten granola bar. Someone had been living up there. I called the cops again. This time, they took it seriously. Turns out the guy had been squatting in multiple units over the last few months. He wasn't even a tenant. Maintenance said he'd been caught once before and supposedly evicted, but no one followed up. He'd gotten in through the crawl space and used the shared attic space to enter different units at night. No cameras, no alarms, no trace. They never caught him. I moved out a week later. To this day, I still don't know how long he was watching me, or how many nights I went to sleep thinking I was alone when someone else was just a few feet above me.
Some intruders come and go, others never left in the first place. But sometimes it's not your home they're in. It's someone else's. And you just happen to be the one house sitting. This next story will change how you feel about sleeping in someone else's home.
I was dog sitting for my sister when this happened. She and her husband had gone to Cabo for the week, and they asked if I could stay at their place in the suburbs and watch their two dogs, Cooper and Luna. I was between jobs at the time, so I said sure. Free food, big house, and a couple of friendly dogs. Why not? They live in one of those quiet, newer developments where every house looks like a slightly different version of the same house. 2 stories, vinyl siding, tiny fenced backyards, the kind of place where people leave Halloween decorations up until January and no one really says anything. The first few nights were totally normal. I'd walk the dogs around 8, feed them, watch Netflix until I passed out. Nothing exciting. Nothing strange. But the 4th night? That's when things got weird. It was around 11:30. I was downstairs watching a movie in their living room, dogs curled up next to me, when I heard something upstairs. A short, hollow tap-tap sound. Almost like footsteps, but not quite. More like the heel of a shoe making contact with hardwood, just once or twice. I muted the TV, listened. Nothing. The dogs were still lying beside me, no reaction at all. So, I figured maybe the house was settling. These newer homes sometimes do that, expanding and contracting with the temperature changes. I even said out loud, "Chill out, it's nothing," like I needed to hear myself say it to believe it. Then, just as I was about to unpause the movie, Luna stood up, ears perked, facing the stairs, and she started growling. Low, steady, and aimed directly up toward the 2nd floor. Cooper followed suit, but didn't growl, just stood next to her, tail stiff, staring toward the stairs like he was tracking movement. My heart started racing. I stood up and grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen drawer. Their hallway lights were on a timer, and I didn't feel like fumbling for switches. I walked slowly to the bottom of the stairs, trying not to make a sound. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I started up the steps one at a time, dogs still frozen at the bottom, not following like they usually did. That alone made my skin crawl. I turned down the hallway toward the guest room, where I'd been sleeping, and peeked inside. Nothing. Same with the office. Closet, clear. Bathroom, empty. But then I got to the master bedroom. Door closed. Which didn't make sense because I always left it cracked for airflow. I reached for the handle, but it was locked. Again, didn't make sense. They don't lock their door when they leave. There's no reason for that room to be locked at all. Then I heard it. A sound from inside the room. Click, like the quiet snap of something being shut or opened. I backed away slowly and called my sister. She answered after a couple rings, half asleep. "Hey, sorry to call so late," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Did you lock your bedroom before you left?" She sounded confused. "Number why?" "Because it's locked," I said, "and I just heard something inside it." Now she was fully awake. "Wait, what do you mean you heard something?" "I mean, it sounded like someone's in there." She went quiet, then asked, "Did you call the police?" "Number, not yet. I wanted to check with you first. She told me to get out of the house, said she was calling 911 from her end and would send them over." I grabbed my jacket, clipped leashes to the dogs, and stepped outside. I waited across the street, in the shadows, pacing back and forth as I watched the house. 12 minutes later, 2 officers arrived. I flagged them down, explained the situation again. They went inside while I stayed with the dogs out front. 10 minutes later, they came back out and said the house was empty. "No signs of forced entry," the younger one said. "Rooms locked from the inside, so unless someone had a key and slipped out a window, there's no one in there." I asked if they'd checked the attic. They hadn't, but offered to go back in and take a look. Again, nothing. They told me it might have been old ductwork shifting. Sound can bounce weird in houses like that, especially at night. Maybe the door was just warped and shut itself. I knew what I heard, but there was nothing they could do. They left. I went back inside, triple-checked every window, locked every door, and left every hallway light on. But I couldn't sleep. Around 4:30 a.m., I finally started to drift off on the downstairs couch. That's when Luna started growling again. This time, it was toward the kitchen. I sat up and grabbed the flashlight. Then Cooper started barking, one loud, deep bark, and darted toward the laundry room. There's a door in that room that leads to the garage. I walked slowly after him, turned the corner, and stopped. The door to the garage was open, just a few inches. I didn't breathe, didn't move. Then I pushed it shut and locked it, called the cops again. This time they searched everything, including the garage, the backyard, under the deck, all of it. Again, nothing. But something was going on. That next morning, I checked the Ring cam. There was no footage of anyone entering. But around 3:19 a.m., it recorded a clip of the garage interior light turning on and staying on for exactly 22 seconds. Then off again. That camera is motion activated, but no person was visible in the frame. I showed it to my sister. She thought maybe a bug flew past the sensor, but I know what I saw, and I know how long that light was on. I stayed one more night, last night, because I didn't want to leave the dogs alone, but I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen with the flashlight on the table and both dogs at my feet. Around 1:40 a.m., I heard the master bedroom door creak open upstairs. Not slam, not bang. Creak, like someone trying not to be heard. I stared at the ceiling and waited, but nothing followed. I didn't go up. At sunrise, I packed a bag and took the dogs to my apartment. And I haven't stepped foot in their house since. When my sister got back, she called me and said the weirdest thing. "Did you move the chair in our bedroom closet?" I said no. I hadn't been in the room at all. She told me it had been pulled out and turned around, facing the inside of the closet like someone had been sitting in it, watching the wall. She also found one of her perfume bottles on the floor. The cap was off, and it was empty. No signs of theft, nothing missing, just little changes. I don't know who was in that house with me. I don't know how they got in or why they never touched anything, but something was in there. Something was waiting. And to this day, the scariest part isn't that I was home alone. It's that at some point, I wasn't.